Friends, chess players, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the Sicilian. For the first time on the channel, I'll bring you a mini repertoire as black to play against 1e4 using the Sicilian, my favorite opening. Well, I've often told you that the Sicilian is one of the most theoretical openings. However, today I'll show you one of the Sicilian lines with the least theory. Incidentally, it's funny because this very Sicilian was played against me by Grandmaster Oleg Korneyev. He's one of the people I probably respect the most, both in terms of chess and personal development, and I have to say he pretty much crushed me. So I'll also show you my game in addition to explaining the theory behind this opening. Let's get right to it then. No more chit-chat. Let's immediately see which Sicilian we're talking about. We're talking about the Sicilian. The Kan's variation with e6 and then a 6, but we'll see a surprise. This Sicilian is considered one of the easiest to play. First of all, by playing the move e6, we're avoiding two major variations, which are obviously those related to the move bishop to b5, so the Rossolimo and the Moscow. So we're already reducing the amount of theory, and by quite a bit. Anyway, I'll show you the resource that was played against me, Oleg Korneyev, who cuts down the theory even further. Theory. In fact, he played a hybrid. This here is the Kan, so usually black here continues with the move b5 and develops the bishop, achieving a fairly decent position. But today I'll also show you this other very interesting plan, which is a sort of hybrid between the Kan and the Scheveningen here with d6. This move order is really clever. I'll show you right away what the Scheveningen is and what the usual problem is. The Scheveningen is this opening. Yeah, so in this position, after knight takes d4. Black plays knight f6, white responds by defending the pawn with knight c3 and now the move d6. What is the problem with this position? The problem is all the variations where white starts pushing g4. So here in particular we have both g4 and also rook to g1. Both ideas are very valid and the lines are quite interesting. So from this point of view, what does Master Korneyev's move order aim to do? In this way, in case of knight to c3, he wants to continue with b5, so a regular Kan, and now let's see what to do. In case of bishop to d3 or even c4, which are the other two main variations, he wants to continue with the Scheveningen structure, which I can tell you is very strong and above all simple to play. Why is it so good in this case? Because white, having already placed the bishop on d3, basically here, no longer has, let's say, the validity of the idea with g4 because the bishop has already gone here. And so let's say we're playing a Scheveningen where white can't go for the main lines. Let's first immediately look at how to respond to knight to c3. To knight to c3, we, be careful, could still reply with d6, and that's what we're about to see. However, in my opinion, here white again retains the possibility to play g4, which is a very interesting and very strong option. And I can assure you that black's position is quite uncomfortable. So what's the idea? After knight to c3, here we play b5. I repeat, we could risk playing d6 and hope that white doesn't know about g4. But if we want to play cleanly, here we go with b5, and I'll show you this modern idea. White develops the bishop to d3. Attention, excuse me, before I forget, the move b5 is very important strategically in the Sicilian. We need to understand these for all Sicilian variations, not just the one we're looking at now. We play the move b5 if and only if white has played knight to c3. Because if white doesn't play knight to c3, the move b5 is a serious mistake. Why is it a serious mistake? Because white continues with the move f4, which puts pressure on black's queenside. And when we play b4, there is no knight on c3 that would obviously be attacked and forced to lose time. And here white, quite simply, will set up a structure where the knight will immediately occupy these very interesting squares. So never play b5 in the Sicilian if white hasn't played knight to c3. That's an important idea anyway, so let's move on. b5, bishops are exchanged, bishop to b7 and after short castling. There are many variations here, but I suggest this modern Kan variation, which has been giving excellent results to grandmasters. And also, let's say, in terms of real concrete preparation. Here, knight to c6. Black immediately goes to solve the problem of the central knight. And here, by capturing with the bishop, white is faced with a problem because I will then continue with b4. And the a4 square is controlled, so the knight will have to retreat to a somewhat more passive square. Let's see how it continues. White defends and brings the rook into play with rook e1. And now for us, it's appropriate to continue with knight to e7, because with knight to e7, we want to follow up with knight to g6. Knight to g6 is an excellent position for the knight here, because in the future, it might aim for the e5 square, especially if the bishop goes to e3. We can already continue with b4, as I mentioned earlier, forcing the knight to retreat, and now knight to g6. Knight to d4 is white's best move for the knight, and obviously it attacks the bishop. We don't want to allow this exchange. So bishop to b7, and pay attention. Every time white plays f4, black gets excellent play with bishop to c5 and queen to b6, which is an absolutely advantageous setup. So at this point, the main move for white here is actually queen to h5, which is among the most played moves. However, here black simply places the queen on c7, which is useful both for applying this pressure and one day perhaps for attacking along the file. And after that, places the bishop on d6 and continues with the pressure. The bishop is also important because it supports the e5 square, which we now take because we play knight to e5. Thank you. And obviously, let's say the bishop on e5 is very strong. Do you see the pressure? It controls both diagonals, and here black has an absolutely golden position. So if our opponent plays knight to c3, then we play the classic line with b5. Now let's look at my game, where after bishop to d3, Grandmaster Kornev here decides to play this hybrid with the Scheveningen by playing d6. And here I have to say the plan is really very simple, the plan for black. Black now develops normally, knight to f6, bishop to e7, short castling. Then he places a knight on c5, which is definitely an interesting square in this position, because it puts pressure on the center and on the bishop, and then he will develop the bishop to b7. Practice helps us much more here, so let's go straight to the game, which is really illustrative. Knight to c3, knight to f6, short castling, bishop to e7. Both players have played normal moves. Here, as white played a 4 to prevent b5, but you'll see that for black this is not a problem. Short castling, rook to a1 brings the rook into play. Now Master Kornev plays b6 here, so he will continue with this setup. I played f4, bishop to b7, queen to f3, knight bd7. Now I've developed the bishop, and black, very simply here, has basically brought the knight to c5. How does black continue in this position? Simply by further improving his pieces. He'll want to bring the rook to c8, maybe move the rook to c7, the other rook to d8, and then at the right moment, black can also decide to take the bishop pair without rushing. The position is really quite uncomfortable for white. In fact, in this position, I went straight for it and played b4. But look at how easy black's play is. Knight takes, pawn takes, and here, rook to c8. At this point, the master simply brings the rook into play. You see how simple black's moves are. That's why I recommend this setup to you, because you really play without any effort. I played b5, trying to control the c6 square, and here knight to d7. The knight here wasn't doing anything, so very simply knight. The d7 and the other knight returns to c5. A simple and effective plan. With white, I tried this move. Obviously, I want to take control of the b file, and I want to take the square, b5. So in short, a reasonable move. Bishop takes a6, knight to b5, and at this point, bishop to f6. Another very, very simple move by black. Black is simply activating his pieces without any effort. I tried to unpin the knight with rook to a 2, but then knight to c5, rook to a 3. Because now there are other problems. There are also these threats. Namely, bishop takes d4, knight takes d4. And after that, as you can see, the pawn is attacked. So I also have to defend this pawn. And here black again, queen to d7, simple moves, rook to b1. And now this is the moment when the master went a bit more tactical. He played rook to a8 and started threatening things. Bishop to c3. That was the move I played, and here black played calmly. e5, he probably could have immediately gained an advantage with this tactic. Bishop takes c4, then he takes here and then takes the pawn on a 4. Let's say putting, obviously, to the test the coordination of my pieces, but he chose this line, which is still fine. He played e5, knight to f5. And here he played with this tactic, bishop takes b5, and then rook takes a 4. So this is a removal of the defender. I took on a 4, knight takes a 4, and at this point there's an attack on c3 and on b5. So it looks like I might lose a piece, but actually this was anticipated because I played rook to d5 with the idea of knight takes c3. Here the game gets a bit more spectacular, but unfortunately he had calculated everything and there's not much to be done. What is my idea with white? Rook takes d6, attacking the queen. The queen has to move, and now rook takes f6. A beautiful move, because obviously black can't capture with the pawn, because otherwise, queen to g4 check and queen to g7 mate. And so with this tactic I got the piece back, but unfortunately knight to e2 comes. This is a very, very interesting deflection tactic. Now I can't capture, because queen to c1 check, and if the king moves, he takes on f4 and then is ready to take the rook. So he was really good here to spot knight to e2, so I had to move the king. Then simply he takes the pawn on f4. You can see how this position is now very complicated with white down material, and now black with precise play will convert. He will convert. I played another trick. I tried to play rook to c6 to then deliver a double attack. In case of queen takes, queen to a7, obviously. But what follows, unfortunately, is just a simple display with black tidying up his pieces a bit. And then he opens up the game to take advantage of my king's position. And here, after pawn takes a5, unfortunately, there's the threat of knight to h5 check and taking the queen, the threat from the knight. There are just too many threats here. I played queen to g4, but after queen takes g4, I resigned, because obviously there's also a piece hanging. Okay, I showed you the whole game because this way you can't say, no, you only show us the games where you win. I try to show you the games that I think are educational here. Grandmaster Oleg Korniev was extremely instructive, but the best part of this game is that, as you can see, he carried out this plan really effortlessly. So bishop e7, castling, then the knight goes to c5 and the bishop goes to b7. If white played a 4, black calmly plays b6. If white didn't play a 4, obviously, at a certain point, black is more comfortable and will even play pawn to b5. And after that, we'll put pressure in the center. We'll put pressure on the bishop. On d3, black never has. White never has any counterplay. Real in this position, so I suggest to you this hybrid version. So against bishop to d3, play the Kan Scheveningen. So here d6. Against knight to c3, I repeat, you can risk this, but g4 here is very strong. So against this, instead play a normal Kan. So these are my suggestions for playing a Sicilian in a very simple way. In my opinion, this is the easiest Sicilian to play with the least theory. I repeat, in the Sicilian, there are many theoretical variations, the Najdorf, the Sveshnikov, where it takes you just 2 years to study the theory before you can play them. And so instead, this one is very simple, in my opinion, from a practical point of view. As you saw from this game, it's very, very, very dangerous, so I highly recommend it. And that's it. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to support the channel, as always, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And I'll see you in the next videos.